Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Olivier Menon. I am the Events Officer at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar about Office 365 implementation, which will be presented by Matt Walton, who is Senior IT Consultant at InfoExchange. Before we start, just a quick reminder that this session is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you all shortly. You'll then be able to access that recording and the slides at any time on our website. If you have any question, please type it in a question box on your webinar panel and we'll go through them during the session. We'll have halfway through the webinar and at the end, 2 sessions to answer your questions. And if we don't have time to go through them all, Matt will answer them offline. If you have any technical issue, please also type it in a question box on your webinar panel, and I will try my best to sort it out for you. And that's all from me. Matt, it's all yours.
Thank you, Ollie, and welcome everyone. I hope that you're all getting back into it in the new year and ready to start looking at implementing Office 365, because that's really what this session is about. It's sort of for all of you who are either considering Office 365 or maybe have started on your Office 365 journey, to help you think about those things that can reduce risk and increase the benefit that you get from such a great product. So my name's Matt Walton, and yeah, I help organizations all day, every day to both implement and use Office 365. So at InfoExchange, we're a not-for-profit, and we only help other not-for-profits with technology. So we work with all sorts of, all sizes of community organizations and not-for-profits, ranging from volunteer-led organizations with only a few volunteers to large national-wide organizations with thousands of staff. So that is, Office 365 can be quite different, obviously, depending on your type of organization and your needs. So what those small orgs need is very different from what the large organizations need. So hoping today you'll get a bit more of a sense of how you could implement Office 365. So today, really, we'll do a bit of a high-level overview, but I'm hoping that some of you have already attended the other webinar, which is more an introduction and a bit of a demo, because today we're really wanting to focus more on really what are the benefits, how you use it, what licenses, and then get into the detail of how to implement at a high level each application. So whether you're looking to move your emails or your documents or Skype for Business or discussions, I'll touch on each of those, as well as giving you things to think about, whether it's infrastructure or mobility, privacy, and all of those other things that come along with implementing an IT solution. So as Ollie said, I'll give everyone an opportunity to ask some questions about halfway and also at the end, and also feel free to email me anytime. So my email address is on the front slide and the last slide, and particularly if your question is really specific to your organization, it may be better to just let's do it offline. I can have a chat with you over the phone or do it via email. All right, so let's get into what is Office 365. So most of you, I'm assuming now, will know what a cloud-based platform is. It really means that someone else, in this case Microsoft, is hosting these servers for you. So you don't need an Exchange server in your office anymore, or you don't need SharePoint or Link. Microsoft is now providing them for you as a cloud-based platform. And they look after all the hosting. So the reliable service there, they have a 99.9% SLA. So that means that it's going to be up almost all the time. And that's usually much better SLA than you would get if you hosted your own server and needed to do your own reboots and all of those sort of things. The other thing it does, it provides you with Office apps, so Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, those sort of things, both on the desktop and via the web. So we can talk a little bit more about that later. The other great thing is it always is at the latest version. So you no longer have to do upgrades. So you don't have to upgrade from Exchange 2010 to Exchange 2013 to Exchange 2016. It's just always on the latest version, and often you don't even notice when they've done the upgrade. The other great thing about Office 365 is it can work on any device. So no longer do Microsoft not talk to Apple devices and other web browsers. It can work on an iPhone, an Android, Google Chrome browser, any of those. So it's really it helps you with getting your workforce out and about and mobile. So Office 365 comes with a suite of applications. Now, before you get a little bit daunted by this, don't feel you need to use all of these at once, and we'll talk about that later, but this is what's available. It doesn't mean it's all suitable or all relevant to you. So many organizations that we work with just want their emails and calendars and contacts. So that's those first three boxes at the top, mail, calendar, people, and that's all they use it for, and that is perfectly fine. So I'll talk through some of these other ones later. The other thing to think about is these change all the time, so you'll constantly grow and change, and Microsoft will come up with a new application and roll one out, and it will just pop up as a box here. So there's constant growth and change, which is great, but can also take some careful change management. So that's the broad suite of Office 365. Now, what many of our clients use is what's called the E1 plan. And I'm guessing most of you will have heard that the E1 plan is free for eligible not-for-profits. So, as you can guess, that's why a lot of our clients want to use this plan, because it's free, which is great. And it's very generous of Microsoft to donate that. So essentially you can have as many licenses as you want. So we've got organizations that have thousands of staff that use E1 plan and have basically get free email, free SharePoint. So as it says here, each user gets 50 gig in a mailbox. Now we have thousands of staff using this on a daily basis, and very few, if any, ever fill up 50 gig of a mailbox or 1 terabyte of OneDrive storage. So you also got a terabyte of SharePoint storage plus 50 meg per user. So you also get the online app. So from any device, you can go to an internet cafe overseas and write a Word document with Word Online, Excel Online, those sort of things. You get Skype for Business video conferencing. You get phone support from Microsoft, and you can essentially access this from anywhere. Now, that's the E1 plan. Now, some of you may have noticed there are a couple of things there that you may want that you don't get with the E1 plan. So, there are lots of other plans out there. Some of our clients also choose to upgrade or add to an E3 plan. And the main thing that most of you would have been thinking about on that last slide was missing was Office. So if you want Word, Outlook, Excel, PowerPoint, all those sort of things on your desktop, you need to buy that separately on top of your E1 plan. So there are a couple of different ways to do that. You can do that with this slide. It's an E3 plan, which is $6.38 per user per month, and it comes with all these other things like mobile apps, business intelligence, legal hold on your emails, which means it tracks everything that's sent or received, even if you delete them. But what a lot of organizations do, probably the most cost-effective way to get just a copy of Office on your desktop, is to buy it through Connecting Up for $56 for a once-off purchase. So that means you can actually keep that $56 purchase on your PC for up to 4 years if you use your software assurance. So that ends up being quite cost-effective. The other way that some of our clients do it is get $2.90 per user per month, gets your Pro Plus, and you pay that on a monthly basis to get that desktop copy of Office. And one of the key reasons is if you choose E3 for $638 or the Pro Plus for $290, you can actually have that on up to 5 devices per user. So personally, I have Office on my laptop, which I'm presenting on now. I have Office on my iPhone, which I use to check my emails, do a bit of OneDrive. I do occasionally write a Word document on there just for basic stuff. I have it on my Mac at home, and I also have it on an iPad. So I'm using 4 out of 5 of those Office copies. But so it's really up to you to work out which licensing model is best for you. Some organisations may also be eligible for education licensing or health. So there are a few plans out there. So, but usually the best one to start with is E1, which is free. All right. So that's sort of the licensing model. Just before we move on, some of you may see Business Premium, which is like a cheaper version. There are a few limitations with that, and you can only have up to 300 users. So often we don't recommend that, particularly for mid-sized organisations. And there's a few other limitations. So if you see the cheap one that you go, oh, why didn't Matt recommend that? That's usually the reason. But there's a link on the bottom of that slide which links you off to all these plans so that you can compare them yourself. All right, so how do not-for-profits use Office 365? As I said, everyone uses them differently. But here are some common ways that you could use it. And again, you can pick a couple of these to use it in the short term, and maybe over the next 2 years you can implement half of these or 3/4 of these, and some may never be suitable for you, and that's okay again. All right, so I won't list all of these, but essentially the standard ones that people use are things like that you get as part of Exchange, which is email, calendars, contacts, room bookings, resource bookings, those sort of things. The second thing that a lot of people get is documentation, or things like you can do in SharePoint, like document collaboration, project management, partner portals, information sharing, accessing documents offline, all those sort of things. The other thing that people use, Skype for Business is part of this. So you can have video conferencing, instant message, point of presence, dial-in conferencing. So there's a range of other things that you can do. From a mobility perspective, you can sync things to your local PCs so that you can get them offline. You can have mobile apps. You can use mobile device management to do remote wipes and those sort of things of your devices. And you can also use it for things for staff communication, things like an intranet or a knowledge base, policies and procedures, or discussion boards, things like Yammer for group communication. So there's a range of things in there, and as I said, it's constantly growing and changing, and new tools for business intelligence and dashboards and a range of things are constantly coming on. So I know all of that's a little bit daunting. There's a lot in there. So where do you start? So really the first place to start is, before you even worry about researching what SharePoint does or what Power BI is, really it's about, well, what do we need as an organization? And before you go off and say, yeah, let's implement SharePoint intranet, so just think about who will be using it, why are they using it, when are they using it, and what devices they're using, what they're looking for. Are they looking for a more formal thing where head office is sharing policies and procedures, or do they just want a place to talk with their colleagues and communicate and collaborate? Are they comfortable using this type of technology, or is SharePoint document management going to suit them, or are they really fixed on just using an old file server, and that's okay? So it's really about, is this going to be relevant and suitable for my staff? If I spend all this money setting up a SharePoint intranet, will anyone log in? And why would they need to log in? So having a think about those things first can actually prevent a lot of the issues that we see out there in the not-for-profit sector after they've implemented solutions and then they realize that, you know, no one's using it or it's not working for them. Often it comes back to some of these issues as well. They actually don't need to use it, but or they can't use it because they don't have internet at their site or they don't have the devices to log on with. So once you've determined your requirements and your use cases, then you can start looking at, okay, which tool, which part of Office 365 is right for me? And there's no right or wrong, and there's no sort of clear definition of what you have to use for what purpose. And Microsoft are constantly bringing out new tools to give you choice. The issue with that is it can be confusing because, to be honest, some of these things double up. So some of the things that you can do on SharePoint are also the same things you can do on Office 365 Groups or Yammer, or in some cases Exchange. So really it's about doing that analysis and maybe getting some advice on which one is most suitable for you. But starting with this table, Office 365 Groups is a good simple way to collaborate and even do document management with small teams or small boards or committees. But if you're doing a more discussion and collaboration based, then Yammer is quite good for that. It's like the Facebook for Business style platform. Teams is a new one that's just come out recently, actually. So that's going to help in that space as well. More an instant messaging type solution. If you want to share or book calendars, resources, rent out projectors, those sort of things, Exchange Resources can do that quite well. If you want a full-blown intranet for a large group of staff, for policies, procedures, even project management, then SharePoint can work for that. If you're looking at a dashboard and business intelligence and reporting, Power BI is a good add-on to Office 365. Messaging and video conferencing, Skype for Business is your solution. OneDrive is a good option for individuals' document storage. So essentially everything that you used to store on your desktop or your C drive should now be going in OneDrive for each individual. You get a terabyte each. SharePoint and Power Apps can be good for forms and lists and workflows and some of that basic database. Now it's not a CRM or a case management solution, but it can do some basic things like incident reporting or you know, maintenance requests, those type of things. The other one down there is project management. You can actually use SharePoint, particularly if you want Gantt charts and those type of things. Office 365 Planner is a newish tool that is like a Trello type solution for a more agile project management solution. So look, there are lots of options there, and hopefully that helped explain it. A couple of other options that are on the horizon. So Cloud PABX, which is essentially a phone system replacement, is due very soon, so in the next couple of months. PSTN conferencing is out now. To be honest, I use it. You need an E5 license, which is an additional cost, but it can be a good conference dial-in solution. SharePoint Sync tool is constantly getting upgraded, and a new one came out recently. Groups is growing and growing, and Teams is now available in preview as well. So there are constantly new things that are coming out, and there's also integration with other non-Office 365 products. So things like Microsoft Azure for servers and data warehouses and those sort of things. Dynamics 365, which you could use for your finance system and your CRM. So keep an eye out for all of these, and there's the link there to Microsoft's site. They're very open and public with it. So feel free to have a look into that. If you're planning and you want to know, for example, when Cloud PABX is coming, because next year you want to replace your phone system. So yeah, it's really that analysis around, is each solution right for me? Or in some cases, no, let's stick with our current phone system because it's more cost effective, or whatever the option may be. So please just take each one slowly, do some good analysis of every new tool, and test every new tool before you roll it out. So we sign up for preview, and first release, which means we get all these features first, and we like to test them for quite a while before we then recommend them to our products. So we encourage you to do the same before you roll them out to your users. All right, so all of these great new tools in Office 365 and more coming. So where does that leave you in terms of where to next? So I know it can be confusing, and it can be challenging to work out, okay, well, what do I do first, and why am I doing it? But always the best step to start with is building the business case. Now, when I say business case, I know you're all not-for-profits, not businesses, but really this is about justifying the change and the move to both your board, potentially, if you need to, and your managers, but also to your users. So any time that you're implementing something that makes them change the way that they work, you should be able to justify that to say, well, yes, I'm sorry, now you have to learn how to use a SharePoint intranet, or we're upgrading to Office 2016, so you need to get familiar with that. But why we're doing that is all of these reasons. So this is how you can communicate this and really put a positive spin on any technical change. So these are some common reasons why people move to Office 365. So one of the most common one is we get people all the time saying, oh, look, I've got a 5-year-old server, it's about to die, I don't want to go off and spend $10,000 on a new server. Can we go to Office 365 and reduce the need for me to buy a new Exchange server? And in many cases, that works, and that's a great way to use a free thing donated by Microsoft instead of having to pay for some hardware, pay for software for Exchange, pay for installation, and then manage it on an ongoing basis, or pay a support company to support it on an ongoing basis. So essentially you say, Microsoft, just look after my emails for me, and they'll do that. Now we'll talk later, and I've got a whole other webinar on this, but don't assume that you definitely can get rid of all of your servers to move to Office 365. Many of our clients do, but not all. So that's part of the implementation thinking about that. The other way that people justify Office 365 is just using tools like video conferencing. So we've had many organizations who pay for the implementation of Office 365 or upgrades to their PCs or whatever it might be by just reducing some travel costs. So even myself, I have staff in Sydney and colleagues in Auckland and Adelaide and all over the country. If I had to travel there, it would be a ridiculous cost. So we use Skype for Business for free to do a lot of that communication, both internally and with our clients. So all that money we're saving can be put into doing the great work that not-for-profits do. The other thing that outsourcing your servers essentially to Microsoft is defending against hardware failure. So as I mentioned before, Microsoft offer a 99.9% service level agreement to say it's just going to run all the time. You don't need to worry about that. Whereas when I used to be an IT manager of a large not-for-profit, I used to be the one, pulling my hair out and staying awake at night, worrying about the servers crashing and getting that phone call that I would then have to go and sort of try and resolve. So it's just something you don't have to worry about anymore. one of the most important things and common things that we're seeing for why people are moving to 365 is that collaboration. Nowadays, people are working more together and they're wanting to work together across sites. So they're wanting to be mobile, work from home, work from client sites, but still be able to communicate and work on a document together without having to save 20 different copies of it on different locations. So that creates that single source of truth where you can store a document in SharePoint or OneDrive and 10 people can all edit it at once from 10 locations on 10 devices, and you are confident that it's all the same version. So, and you're not having to do, oh, which version's mine? I'll save this one as final and Matt's version and those sort of things. So it's creating that single source of truth. So all of that, you should be able to find some reasons in there for you to help justify your change for moving to Office 365. Now it'll be different for everyone, but hopefully they give you a few ideas. The other thing that's important when implementing Office 365 is don't feel you need to do it all at once. So this is an example, obviously not going to be suitable for everyone, but we often work with our clients to stage a migration. And this could happen over 12 months potentially, from today when you're first learning about Office 365 in a webinar to when you've fully implemented everything across all of your organization. So 12 months is not unreasonable for that type of thing. So you can pick sort of gradual stages. So again, getting that business case and approval could be the first step, scoping and working out which one you're going to do, preparing your environment. So that's things like, okay, well, are my PCs up to scratch? Is my internet connection going to be suitable? I need to upgrade to Office 2016, those type of things. Are my staff ready for change? And then where possible, do a bit of a pilot, set up a trial, do some demo, testing, work with a partner to do this if you need. And then look at authentication. So are we synchronizing it using AAD Connect with our local server? So there's one username and password, or are we just setting up Office 365 as a separate username and password from our local? And that's okay as well. So a lot of people do email first. So email is often something that people want to get off their servers, and it's free and it's reasonably simple migration process. So often people do email and Skype for Business, because Skype for Business is, again, easy to implement just from a video and instant messaging perspective. And then after they've done that, then they maybe look at something like SharePoint for an intranet, and they do a bit of a design stage, and IA means information architecture. And then after that planning process, then they build and launch their intranet and do training and change management and communication with their staff. And then maybe down the track, then they launch OneDrive for personal document storage and Yammer for discussion boards and communication, video for for videos, and then business intelligence and Power BI. So look, this is one example. This didn't include everything, and this is probably more for a mid-size organization. Obviously, the smaller, simpler ones can do things a bit quicker and easier. So hopefully that gives a bit of a sense of that you don't need to try and do everything all at once. So don't be daunted. You can take baby steps. All right, Ollie. It's 2:30, so I thought I'd pause halfway before I get into... So the next steps, I'm going to talk about some of the key applications. So I'll spend a bit of time on Exchange, then I'll talk about SharePoint, then I'll talk about Yammer and Skype, and then at the end I'll talk more about local infrastructure and mobility and other sort of implementation tips. So I suppose, yeah, if there's any questions now, type them into the chat so that we can, particularly if there's any questions about the broader Office 365 or licensing or anything like that. All right, Ollie, any questions?
Yeah, first question from Jessica, who asks, if you're using Microsoft Exchange for your emails, where is your data saved? If you're in Australia, is it stored in Australia?
Yes, I assume she's referring to if you migrate to Exchange Online as part of Office 365, if you set up a tenant now, it is stored in Australia. It is stored primarily in Sydney data centre with a secondary data centre in Melbourne.
And that was the only question. Oh, we've got another question that just popped up from Sue. So when you are in Office 365, can you access documents off a network drive on a local server?
Sorry, I'm not really sure what that question means. So essentially, if you can use Office 365 for email and keep using your local server for documents, if that's what the question was. Alternatively, some organizations actually use SharePoint for document management instead of a network drive or a server. So you can use SharePoint and OneDrive for documents, or you can use your local server for documents. So, but yes, I think maybe the question was about just because you're moving your emails to Office 365 doesn't mean you have to move your documents. That if you're happy with your documents on your file server, then you can keep them there and just move your emails.
All right, a question from Kate who asks, what's the E2 plan? Because you've mentioned E1 and E3, but not E2. Is it relevant?
Yes, it can be a little bit confusing. E2 is basically the same as E1. So E2, yeah, often when you get eligible for E1, Microsoft just assign you the E2. Because it's free, it's the same. So I would just treat it the same as E1.
Question from Kim, with Business Premium, does it have all features for up to 300 users?
No. So Business Premium has limited features. So there was a link on that slide that links off to, gives you a comparison to all the different plans. So Business Premium gives you restricted version of Office. So it's like the difference between Office Standard and Office Professional. So with Business Premium, you get Office Standard, and you don't get the full functionality. So essentially, there is very little reason why you wouldn't just go the free E1 and then buy Pro Plus, which is essentially the same cost as the non-profit Business Premium. Now, I actually did it earlier today for another organisation. You should be able to just change your plans within your one tenant. It used to be a real pain to change, but now I believe you can just change your plans to E1, which gives you all that full functionality, even if you're on a non-profit Business Premium tenant.
All right. Another question, does 365 work nicely if someone already has a personal 365 account? Could there be conflict between your personal and professional accounts?
To be honest, yes, it can get a little bit confusing if you've got, look, it can work together. Yes, they can sit side by side, but the user just needs to be very conscious about when they're saving things, which one they want as the default. So you can use multiple accounts. Like when in my Outlook, for example, I have multiple clients that I'm using for different, and I'm syncing some documents for that client, I'm syncing some documents for another. You just need to be aware of it. So it can work together, but users who aren't fully aware of it can get confused as to where they're saving things, whether it's in their personal one or in their work one.
All right, another question about if you use a local server. So can you have all sources of data available at the same time? As in, if you keep your local servers and you add SharePoint and OneDrive, can you get to all the different data sources from Office 365 with a single login?
So yes, you would need, if you want a single login between Office 365 and your local server, you would need to implement something called AAD Connect, which basically synchronizes your usernames and passwords between your local Active Directory and Office 365. But in answer to the other part of the question, on your PC, you can log into it can be connected to your server, you can log into your file server for some things, and then log into SharePoint and OneDrive for other things. So yes, they can work in together.
Right, thank you, Matt. Last question from Russell. You mentioned at the start of the webinar an Access app. Could you just talk a little bit about what it is?
Access app? You do get Access as part of Office 2016 Pro Plus, and Access has some level of synchronization with Office 365. Access also has some limitations in terms of you can't necessarily just put a custom Access app and dump it sort of on SharePoint or anything like that. So you do need to be a little bit careful with Access. I'm not sure specifically what which points he's referring to with Access, but look, Access can synchronize, or you can do some basic things. I think part of it is looking at your functionality. What do you need that database for? And then looking at what the best tool is. So sometimes it could be you could use SharePoint for that, or keep Access on your server, or use a basic version of Access synchronized with SharePoint. So that's, I suppose, you just need to look at that. Happy to talk offline if I haven't answered any of these questions sort of to the depth that you're after.
Thank you, Matt. That was the last question so far, so you can go to the second part of the presentation.
Great, thank you. So yeah, this one I was going to talk a little bit more detail about some of the popular and common applications that people are looking at. Hopefully this will provide a bit more clarity on really what is Office 365 and how can it help your organization. So one of the most common popular apps that most not-for-profits use is Exchange Online. So essentially what it's doing is replacing what used to live on your server, either as part of a small business server or a standalone Exchange 2010 or 2013 or 27 server. You can now get rid of those servers and move it all to Exchange Online, which Microsoft hosts for you. It can also replace, if you're using Gmail or any of those other paid type services where you're hosting your emails. Essentially now Exchange Online can do that for you for free. Now, many people still choose to use Outlook, including myself, on the desktop. So I have Office 2016 on my desktop through an E3 plan, and I use Outlook. So for people who are using Outlook, if you've got Exchange one day and they're using Outlook, and then the next day you move them to Office 365 and they still use Outlook, to be honest, there's not a massive visual difference. It's more what's going on behind the scenes. So it's not a lot of change from a user perspective if they're using Outlook. You can also use a web portal from any device on any web browser to log in and access your emails. You can also use the Outlook app on your mobile phone. So I use the Outlook app on my iPhone to access all my emails, or you can configure Apple Mail or any of those other ones. You can have as many accounts as you want for staff or volunteers or boards, as well as shared resources. So things like the meeting room that I'm sitting in right now, I booked through Outlook, through Exchange Online. We book our cars, projectors, all sorts of stuff. The challenge with Exchange is you do need to migrate the data from your current email system over to your new email system. So that's really the hard and challenging bit. Not always hard, but it means there's a little bit of work to move from your current Exchange over to Exchange Online. Now, to do that, there's a few different ways to do that. So if you're considering migrating your emails, this next slide is going to hopefully help you decide the way that you will do that. So there's sort of 5 common ways. This isn't all of them, to be honest, but these are the 5 ways we often use to migrate organizations across. So look, if you're small and you've typically got less than 30 PCs and you use Outlook and have mail stored locally, so then usually you could just do a manual PST sort of export-import type process on each PC to migrate your mail across. So that's probably the simplest and easiest way to do it. The other ways are a bit more automated, and you can either use IMAP, or if you've got an Exchange server, you can use a cutover, which basically means you set up a link between your old system and your Office 365, and then suck all the mail, calendars, contacts across using a cutover. And then on that day, so all staff are using an Exchange on the Saturday, and then on the Monday, after you've done your migration, on the Sunday, for example, on the Monday, everyone now logs into Office 365, or you configure Outlook for everyone. So that's a common tool for organizations between 30 and 100 users. If you're not on Exchange and you're on a sometimes Gmail or a hosted email application, you may need to use a third-party tool. So for some of our migrations, we use third-party tools that can cost up to $12 a user. But if you're a larger organization, over 100 users typically, and you would like to stage your migration. So we do a lot of these where we say, okay, this part of the organization and this office in Melbourne, they want to migrate this week, and then let's do our Sydney office next week, or our Brisbane office the week after. So that's called a hybrid deployment. And that assumes that you've got an Exchange server that is reasonably up to date, that can synchronize with Office 365 for a period of time. So that's often a good way for those larger organizations to migrate. So look, we can obviously ask some more questions after this. I'll also refer you to, we've got things like do-it-yourself workshops and Office 365 readiness assessments that can help you with understanding what's the best process for you to go through. And can you do it yourself, or do you need help? So, because as you can see here, these are varying levels of technical difficulty. So the hybrid's quite technical. We recommend that you use an engineer who's done that sort of thing before. PST migration, which is the top one for small orgs, we have some of those where we give our users work instructions and they can do it themselves. So that really depends on your internal capacity as well. All right, so that's email. The other common application that a lot of organizations are using, and we're helping them with, is SharePoint. So SharePoint is a really good intranet tool, particularly for large organizations. And for some organizations, they actually use it as a file server replacement, particularly for small orgs. However, many organizations still also need local storage. Remember, this is online, and if you're using large video files and all those sort of things, don't automatically assume that you can just dump everything up online on a platform like SharePoint and that it will be exactly like your file server. It is different from a file server, but it can be a good document management solution. So it can also do forms and lists and admin processes. So things, as I said, like new staff requests or incident forms or maintenance requests. We've done those type of things on SharePoint regularly. The other thing it's really good at is collaboration. So having a team site or a site for each project, and you can have task lists and Gantt charts and news and those sort of things. So, because it's such a diverse tool though, and often different from what you're currently doing, you do need to consider a more planned approach to it, and you don't want to just start using it and dumping documents up there. And it's better to consider what we call your information architecture and how you're going to go about your change management and training. It's also, where we say use non-technical staff, it's also a tool that we encourage people like your comms team or your admin staff to learn and drive. It's not necessarily an IT project, it's an organization-wide project to move your organization to SharePoint. So for those who have got SharePoint servers, you used to buy SharePoint as a product, and you used to have to buy licenses and all those sort of things. So essentially, SharePoint Online can replace that old server product for you. So one thing that can be confusing when we talk about document management is the difference between OneDrive and SharePoint. So OneDrive we typically recommend as a per-user use. So personally, I use OneDrive for just my day-to-day working documents that I don't need to share with anyone else. It's essentially what I used to store on my desktop. But now they're in OneDrive, they're backed up and they're secure, and I can get them from anywhere. I have a OneDrive app on my iPhone, or I can get from my Mac at home as well. But all those files belong to me. So if I left InfoExchange and my account was deleted, all of those files would go. So I also need somewhere to store files that InfoExchange wants to keep or that I want to share with my colleagues. And typically SharePoint is good for that. So I also have a SharePoint site where I store all my documents that I want to share with my staff and my colleagues and work together on team sites or projects. So we have a separate SharePoint environment for that. And regardless of who stores it there, so I could upload my documents to SharePoint, and then I could leave InfoExchange and my documents will still be there. There'll still be version control, there'll still be permissions, there'll still be everything that everyone needs to access. The other thing that can get confusing is there's a tool called OneDrive, synchronization tool. And what that allows you to take your files offline. So I sync my OneDrive and I sync some of my SharePoint libraries so that when I go on a plane, I can work on this PowerPoint presentation, for example, on a plane, and then when I land, it then synchronizes back up to Office 365. So you can have some offline files, and even when, actually last week, our internet went down here at the office, I just continued working on those offline files, and then when the internet came back on, it synchronized back up. All right, so moving on from, and SharePoint, look, to be honest, we have a whole other webinar on SharePoint, so if you're interested in SharePoint, I would encourage you to either check the recording or register for that, and we've got do-it-yourself workshops for SharePoint as well. Skype for Business, so it used to be called Link, and now comes as part of Office 2016. So you actually, most of you may already have Skype for Business on your PCs. So as soon as you get Office 365, you can just start using it. So I use it for a lot of instant messaging with my colleagues. You can use it for external sharing. So a few of my clients, I do instant messaging and video conferencing with. And now you can have PSTN dialing. So I have this plan, which means I can set up a video conference and it has a phone number dial-in, similar to how some of you dialed into this conference. And essentially, yeah, if those people aren't at PCs or don't have Skype for Business, then they can just use the phone to dial into my Skype for Business meeting. The next thing that Microsoft are rolling out is Cloud PABX, which means replacing your phone system. So, but as a minimum, I would just use it for point of presence, which means I can see where all my colleagues are. like you can see in that screen, you can see where they're available or offline or away, and just send them a message. All right, Yammer's another good one that, again, not for everyone. It's a bit like Facebook for Business. So it's part of Office 365 now, so it means your username and password are all the same across all these apps. And it's really good discussion platform. So InfoExchange use it, and we have different groups where we have an environment group and an OH&S group and teams, and we can discuss things either in those groups or as an all-company group where we send notifications and then we reply to each other's and we do likes and those sort of things. So you also get good notifications to your email, and you can have a feed in your SharePoint site, which we have as well. So it's good to have your CEO and other key people using it. So it's our way of sharing news instead of those annoying all-staff emails that used to go around to all organisations. So it's sort of a replacement of that, and it will always be there. So you can always go back and look at old posts and those sort of things, as opposed to trying to sift through your inbox. All right, so there's some of the common ones. To be honest, I could keep going on all the other applications, but we do have another webinar as well where I talk a bit more about some of those newer applications, and for those who are already using Office 365, how to use groups and those sort of things. But I'm assuming all of you guys are looking at implementing. So the other really important thing to consider is your local infrastructure ready? So these are some of the things that we encourage you to think about before you move to Office 365. So for example, what version of Office do you have? I just spoke to someone before this webinar who was planning on moving but had Office 2010. And I said, well, actually, Office 2010 is not supported anymore with Office 365, so we recommend you move to Office 2016. Do you need directory synchronization, which is what I mentioned before if you want the single sign-on? That's called AAD Connect. Do you still need local servers? Do you want local backups or offline files in case your internet goes down? Are your PCs compatible? If you're all on XP still, I would move off that and again try and move to Windows 10 Pro. Do you want to access your soft mobile devices? Do you want to scan and print to email? Do your scanners support that? If you're going to start using email on mobile devices, are you going to manage them? You know, what if you lose your mobiles? Can you do a remote wipe and those sort of things? Does your ADSL connection support Office 365? If you're wanting to use Office 365 video and those sort of things, you may need to look at your internet connections. And I'll talk about that on the next slide. Does your support provider actually know anything about Office 365 and are they able to support you? We actually have a lot of people that come to us and say, oh, we really want to move to 365, but our support provider doesn't know anything about it and can't support us anymore. So they need to make that decision around, okay, well, perhaps they need a new support provider or look at their options. So these are all the things that you just need to think about, and hopefully they're all fine, but they're important factors. And probably the two most important ones are up in that top left corner, which is data migration from existing systems. So that's how to get your old emails or your old files over into Office 365, and training and change management. So how are you going to communicate this to your users, and do they need, what level of training do they need? So they're some of the key things to think about. So just going back to that point about internet connection. So where are you going to access Office 365 from, and is it suitable from an internet connectivity perspective? So to be honest, if you're on an Exchange server and you're just sending or receiving emails and you're wanting to move to Office 365 and still just send and receive emails, your internet requirements aren't really going to change. So you could probably get away with ADSL or whatever you're on now. However, if you're going to start using things like syncing big OneDrive files, or using video conferencing, or using SharePoint as an intranet, or those type of things, then you may want to look at your internet connection. So this little table might give you a sense of how to go about it. But in general, I think where hopefully a lot of not-for-profits now are maturing in regards to not relying on ADSL anymore. So as far as any organisations over 10 staff, generally should look at upgrading over an ADSL connection to a more synchronous connection where your upload and your download are the same. So that large org there with over 50 staff at one office, 20 meg upload and 20 meg download. So unfortunately, the cost of that can change depending on location. So we've got some clients in Melbourne who can get that sort of connection for $200 a month, which is pretty cost effective, or on NBN you can get that as well for $100 a month. However, we have other clients in regional Adelaide, regional South Australia, sorry, that would have to pay thousands of dollars a month for a fibre connection. So it's about you getting a few quotes and looking at not just Telstra, but some of those TPG and other connections that are getting wider and more available. All right, the other thing to think about is mobility. So are you going to access this on mobile devices? To be honest, it's pretty easy enough to configure Office 365 email on your Apple phone or Android. Usually we actually recommend mobile apps. So you see that screenshot there of my iPad. All of them are Office 365 apps. So there is an app for every function within Office 365. So I use the Outlook one as my primary email, but I also use Skype for Business and Yammer quite a lot on my phone. So all of you just look at what's there. But also, as I mentioned before, if you've got an E3 license, you actually get better functionality with things like Word and Excel on the mobile apps. You can do more editing, and whereas if you don't have an E3 license and you just have an E1, you get more limited functionality around just read-only sort of things. You can do free mobile device management, but if you actually want to push out applications and manage what's on the devices, then it might be worth exploring something like Intune. All right, so I'm moving quickly because we've only got a few minutes left. Privacy and security. So someone asked this before, but essentially Office 365 now is Melbourne and Sydney. There are still a few organisations, I believe, who were originally in Singapore that may not have come across. So if you've been on Office 365 for quite a while and you haven't communicated to Microsoft about changing, you may still be in Singapore, but any new tenants are automatically in Melbourne and Sydney. And from a security perspective, there's some more detail there if you want to do some due diligence, but really it's up to every organisation to do their own sort of research, and it's all about what you're storing. So in many cases, all the privacy legislation is all about storing client data. Now, if all you're moving is emails, to be honest, you shouldn't be emailing around client data anyway. That should be sitting in a client management system or something like that. So in that case, a lot of people just move their emails to 365 but keep their client data local. But there's organisations like Queensland Government and a lot of large not-for-profits that are now using it as well, if that's any peace of mind. All right, so 10 tips. So just finishing up. So really, as I said, it's about staging and just doing the bits that are most important to you first and saving the bits that might be harder or less of a priority to later. Engagement and understanding the benefits and engaging those local champions is always the most important aspect to making any migration or implementation a success. Number 3, make sure your bandwidth is suitable, particularly for those larger things, and upgrade to Office 2016 if you can. Use an Office 365 expert if your local supplier or support person is not really across it. Review your security. So even just things like passwords and using generic accounts and sharing. You know, there's a lot of great features now in Office 365 that help you with those and help you use it better. Consider local storage if you're going to, you know, before just moving everything to SharePoint, you may still need a local server or NAS or something like that. AAD Connect we've talked about a couple of times if you're wanting to synchronize your usernames and passwords, and look at that online collaboration. And really, again, it's about making sure each application has a clear purpose and adds value. All right, so for those who need help, we have a few different ways we can do that. Through Connecting Up, for $100, we're selling readiness assessments, which essentially will work with you to understand your organization and why you want to use Office 365 and your current environment, and then we'll come up with a plan for you. And so that assessment will give you it's about a 10-page document that says, here's how you should implement Office 365. And yeah, so you could take that and use that yourself if you like. So that's a tool that might help with your business case, for example, and help justify it. For those of you who think you can do it yourself with a bit of support, we do offer DIY workshops for email, SharePoint, and advanced email, and just general 365 as well. So log on to Connecting Up and see if you can register for those. So essentially they're 3 one-hour webinars with some support and resources, and we can help you through a migration process. But obviously you can contact me directly as well if you want any help, or if you want Info Exchange to provide you with a quote or help you with your implementation. So we do ongoing managed support, but we also just do Office 365 projects whether it's SharePoint or email or Yammer or whatever it may be, if you just need some help for a specific limited amount of time, and then you can manage it yourself on an ongoing basis. So happy to speak to anyone offline. Feel free to call or email if you need more details. All right, Ollie, sorry if I've gone a tiny bit over, but feel free to open that up to questions.
Thank you, Matt. That's absolutely fine. We've got a few questions already. The first one from Wayne, who assumes that you can migrate your existing Outlook emails to Office 365 when you move to Office 365.
Yes, so as I touched on before, that's part of the implementation of Exchange Online. So it's reasonably easy to set up a tenant and set up users, but the challenge then is to migrate them across. So that's when you have to go back to that slide where I had that box with migration options to say, is it a PST migration or is it a hybrid migration? So it really depends on the number of mailboxes you have and the type of organization you are. So a readiness assessment might be a good way to help Wayne come up with that plan for how to migrate across. But it's not an automatic thing that Microsoft just do for you. It's a bit of a project that you need to do to get your mail from wherever it is now, so local Exchange, up into Exchange Online.
In Yammer, are posts ordered by the date on which they were posted, or is there a system like in Facebook when if someone comments on it, then it jumps back up in a list?
I believe it's just by date. I could have another look in the settings. I don't believe you can change the settings to select which one, but I'd need to double check that. But usually it's by date. The other thing, you also get Yammer alerts by email. Now I know in the email alert, you tend to get, if people are commenting on a post a lot, that post tends to come in your email notifications. So there are, I suppose, 2 different ways to view Yammer posts. One through the email notifications, and another through the web browser or the app. So
when you going back to migrating and what happens in Outlook, from the desktop Outlook application, if you move to Office 365, is it only your emails that are transferred or also all your contacts?
So it depends on your migration approach. Going back to that other slide, you can, when you do a PST export and import or a hybrid, you would migrate all your contacts and calendars and tasks and emails all in the one process. However, IMAP is one example where IMAP doesn't migrate your calendars and contacts. So that's why we often don't actually use IMAP for that reason. So it depends on the migration approach is the short answer, but yes, you can definitely, there are definitely ways to get your calendars and contacts up into Office 365.
Question from Patricia, does Office 365 allow you to set permissions for users? So can you block some stuff from the financial files, etc.?
Definitely. So it really depends which application you're using. So for example, OneDrive, each user gets their own OneDrive, so automatically it's locked down to each user. And you can do some sharing with that, but I'm assuming Patricia's referring to SharePoint. And in SharePoint, you definitely can set permissions either at a site level or a folder level. So in that case, we would probably set up an area or a site for finance where they would keep their information, and you could only allow either finance or the CEO or the board to access that, and then have a separate area for policies, procedures that all staff need to access. So yes, the permissions in SharePoint are actually, yeah, very, very good.
Following up on that, actually, Matt, because it's a very commonly asked question generally, can you explain how you can block someone when they leave your company if they've got things on their SharePoint to cancel their access to all your documents?
Yeah, so essentially the minute someone leaves, and we do this all the time obviously as a support provider, we essentially just disable their account. And the minute we disable their account, they can no longer log in to the SharePoint site or access emails or anything like that. So essentially you can just reset a password or disable an account. And that's the great thing about Office 365 is it's all centrally managed via a pretty easy admin portal, to be honest. We have some CEOs who even just have the admin app on their mobile phone, and you can reset a password or disable a account just on the app. So yes, it's reasonably easy to do that. The other thing, just along those same lines, is if you're wanting to do a bit more around managing what's on that individual's devices, then you might want something like mobile device management to make sure that you can wipe their device or pull that data off that local device.
Thank you, Matt. That was the last question. Is there anything you'd like to add before we close this webinar?
No, just a quick thank you to everyone, and as I said, there's lots of other steps in the journey in regards to where you can get help from a readiness assessment and DIY workshop. So both of those, as a not-for-profit, we just sort of offer those as a quick way to support the sector to move on to what is a great free platform. So feel free to contact me if you need any further information.
Well, thank you, Matt, for presenting, and thank you everyone for joining us. Just to remind you, the recording of this session and the slides will be uploaded on our website shortly, and the link will be sent to you. If you have any questions that come to your mind later on, as Matt said, you can contact him directly using the email address on your screen, or you can send that through to me at events@connectinghub.org, and I'll forward them to Matt and we'll answer those questions offline. Again, thank you for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your day and see you next time.